I think attention span is way down. I think people are often focused on capturing video and pictures and stuff. So you get a fair amount of the crowd who's not present in a certain sense because they're spending their time filming, I guess, for later consumption. I'm always like, where do these videos go? You know what I mean? I never see them later.
Welcome to Overeducated and Underemployed. We just hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, so thank y'all so much. Tell a friend, and if you're listening and haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button now. We got a really cool episode this week. A lot of people in this community, a lot of people I've interviewed, and myself can relate to the statement that rock and roll saved our lives as a teenager. And Justin Long was the guitar player for one of the bands that saved my life as a teenager. I don't really have much else to say other than I've been friends with this guy since I was a kid. He's one of my ride or dies. He's been there since I was a kid. I grew up hanging out in his recording studio and going on the road with his band. And my life wouldn't be what it is without people like him and him specifically. So here's my awesome talk with Justin Long. We get into it all. We're on Overeducated and Underemployed. I'm here with Justin Long. Justin Long is a guitar player. He's a producer. He's been in bands for at least 30 years.
Yeah.
From Stash to the Petty Nicks Experience.
Oh my gosh, Stash, yeah.
with a band called No Address somewhere in between, and we're gonna get into all of it. But I'm gonna ask you the first question I ask everybody.
Yeah.
And that's, what's the first song that you remember loving as a kid?
The first one that really got me was Walk This Way by Aerosmith.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was hanging around with some older kids, and it was the era where people were getting cheap record players and old records from garage sales because they were like all $1. And somebody put on Toys in the Attic, and I heard Walk This Way, and I was like, I don't even know what that is, but I want to do that. I literally didn't even get it. I was like, I don't know. I don't understand. I didn't know what guitars were. I didn't know what anything. I just was like, whatever that is, I want to do that. And it took me probably a year to figure out what that was. And then I got a guitar, and then et cetera. So
And
that
how
was
old were you?
Yeah, 12 or 13.
So, but it was like right away.
It was immediate. I was just like, literally, this is pre-internet, dating myself.
We're going to do that plenty, don't
We're going to do that plenty. It is great to talk to you, by the way. Yeah, dude. It took me like a year to figure out what that was. You were just like playing. And then I went out and found the record, and then I was like playing the record for people, and I was like, what is this? And asking adults and stuff, and I finally figured out, oh, that's drums, and then here comes the guitar. And I was like, oh, guitar, I think that's the thing I want to do.
So you like deconstructed it.
Yeah, that was probably an early, I guess even going back a little earlier, I guess that was the thing that made me want to play music. The first stuff that really got me was I used to ride around with my grandfather, Pops, listening to big band music. Yeah. And all the orchestration and all the parts working together was always so interesting to me. I couldn't really name a song now because I was just a kid, but the way everything worked together was the thing that was so interesting to me. And then I think when I heard that Aerosmith thing, and it was like the classic drum intro, and then the guitar comes in, and then the rest of the band comes in, and the way it was all put together, it was like instantly, man, we got to do that. Yeah.
So at what point did you start? First of all, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Tallahassee, in Killarn.
Okay. Yeah. What was one of your first concerts that you remember going to?
Gosh, Yeah, I just started wanting to do anything rock and roll, and we had so few options,
And probably even fewer back then.
probably even fewer back then. Yeah, I don't want to say that I definitely it was the guys above me in age that really started making an accessible scene. Anyway, there was
Do you remember some of those band names like some of the local bands that you were seeing?
oh yeah, of course. I was just talking to Kim at your party. Bacon Ray, definitely. What was Tommy Hamilton's band? I was obsessed with Tommy Hamilton. Gruel. A little later, I got aware of Magic Wand, but dude, we would go. This is we would go literally listen the cab stand, like all the cover band places, and we would just ask them to like prop the door in the alley, and we would just stand in the alley and just listen to cover bands all night. And I can't really think of any names other than like John
But you're
Kurzweg.
like underage at this
Oh,
point.
15, 16 years old, and we would
Yeah.
just be like, will you just like prop the door, and we'll just stand, or at the cab stand, we'd get them to, I think they just kept the door open for the door, and we would just stand outside and just listen from outside to all these cover bands.
It's so funny because like I had the same struggle, but I just started talking to all the local bands and being like, hey,
I think
I'll pass out flyers if y'all
you were
get me
so
into the
smart.
show.
I think we just annoyed them because we'd pounce on them. They'd come out for a smoke break, and we'd be like, hey, what's that? I saw you push that one, but what's that? And they'd just be like, kid. Anyway,
So you're watching the sound guy, you're watching
oh, yeah. But maybe not my first big concert, but I remember seeing Van Halen, and Alice in Chains was opening for them on their first album. And I did see Aerosmith pretty early on. Not much, though. There just weren't many opportunities, which is why we wound up just like sitting outside doors, like listening to what we could hear from the parking lot because they're just,
but you knew immediately like the moment you became like a fanatic, you knew you wanted to make music too.
oh, yeah, absolutely.
It was like
That,
simultaneous.
it was immediately the only thing I wanted to do.
How did your family react to that?
Not well.
Yeah.
Not well. Yeah, man. No, they were cool. It was obviously like, I for a minute there had a lot of trouble in school because all I wanted to do was play guitar, and we had to get a little balance on that, which was great. But yeah, left to my own devices, I would just like practice guitar 8 hours a day. It was just all I wanted to do. And I've been pretty lucky to do mostly that.
Yeah.
So, um,
I can't think of a time that I really remember you having like a normal job.
no, and
I mean, once I became aware of
yeah,
once
and
I was-
later I did, but they were all also music related. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And but yeah, that was my thing. I don't know what snapped in my head, but I was like, whatever that is. And then of course I was a big of the Nirvana generation where I probably looked exactly like this before it was cool. Like
Right,
I was
right.
a huge nerd and social outcast until Nirvana came out, luckily, when I was in, I don't know, I guess ninth grade. And then all of a sudden it was cool to play guitar and
This is
have long
probably
hair.
a little after your time, but it reminds me. There's this episode of an animated kid show called Doug, where
I know the show. Yeah,
all of
sure.
a sudden, the look that Doug has worn every day for the entire show
Yeah.
is like the most popular thing around.
Yeah.
It's like on the TV show the
Yeah.
night before, and everybody shows up dressing like him.
Yeah.
And then the next week, the fad changes,
Right.
and they're like, "Why are you still wearing last week's fad?"
Yeah.
And he's always been wearing it.
And it was a little bit, I got lucky to do that. Yeah, anyway, that was my early music stuff. I'll tell you a funny story too, because I was maybe 14 or 15, and we were going to make a little EP. And I don't know, somebody just looked up in the phone book where you would record something, because we were just doing the garage band thing, but we were writing some songs. And or Phil was writing songs at least.
Phil Morton.
Phil Morton, yeah, who I've played with since the very, very beginning. And we were going to make a little EP, and we just looked up where to go, and it was Flamingo Studios, which I don't remember where that is, but it's here in Tallahassee. And the engineer was John Kurzweg. And that, I think, is where I met Kurzweg. But it's what got me later, not even later, it's what got me into producing was I realized I thought it was just about the playing and stuff. Like naturally, you're just playing in your garage and you're just hanging out and you're playing and you're writing
Right.
songs. And I just thought that's what it was. And like many people do, like recording an album is just like taking a picture and like we're just going to do our thing. But then I saw Kurzweg putting in the process and doing things to make things sound. And all of a sudden it started sounding like a record. And I went, oh, there's so much more to this. And oh, maybe I want to do that too. Or maybe a realization of, oh, what I really like is records. Like I love playing and stuff, and I really do, and love performing. But, oh, like maybe what I really love is records. And that was where I first got the idea that, oh, there's more going on here than they just put a band in a room and press record. And,
I mean, unless you're like Steve Albini.
oh, sure. And there are producers that work
Yeah.
that way. But like, even the idea of doing multiple takes, like when you go in at first, you're just like, what? We just played it in our garage and it was great. And then you go into a studio and you play it and you're like, take one. And no, I think that's good. Let's listen to that. And then you walk in the other room and you listen and you're like, oh, that's not what I thought it was. Like, that is not nearly. And
I'm trying to think if I ever even had that illusion.
that's interesting. Yeah, I totally did early on. And then I started realizing, like, oh, there's some magic fairy dust on this. But you probably had more of an exposure, and I can't remember if we've ever had this conversation, to like pop music and stuff when you were a kid, because I, for various reasons, had almost none.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So
I think that's an interesting
Yeah.
dynamic about all this is like, obviously not. No.
Yeah.
Like, if Toys in the Attic is like this thing you deconstruct at 12 or 13,
Yeah.
then yeah, I mean, I probably heard the Beatles at 5, and I probably heard the Walk This Way, and then when I was
Yeah,
younger,
yeah.
but I probably heard Walk This Way with Run DMC
right.
before I was 10.
Oh.
You know what I mean? So, yeah, no, I was definitely exposed to all of that. And I think not only that, I think by the time I was coming up, so much of it was on TV.
Yeah.
So much of it in this is like the double side of this coin, right? There's one, you get to see this like presentation and it video killed the radio star kind of thing,
Sure.
right? But the other side of it is you actually start to see how the sausage is made a little bit more,
Right.
too. And so I'm just not sure that I ever. And then not only that, by the time I'm 13, I'm hanging out at your fucking studio.
Right.
I'm just
Were
not.
you that young? That's
Yeah,
funny.
I
We're gonna have to
was.
talk
Yeah,
about it.
yeah. And
Yeah,
I'm
that's
just not
awesome.
sure that I ever had that illusion.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting.
I had I mean, for whatever reason, like no real exposure to music at all when I was a kid.
So
Not that you didn't hear random places and you hear something, and I
You
remember
never took like piano lessons as a kid or anything either.
no,
Okay.
no, and no MTV. I mean, they had MTV.
Yeah.
I'm not at that old, but
Yeah,
like,
yeah. No,
yeah,
you're not
but
much
like,
older than me.
yeah,
It's
but
like it doesn't matter much now. It mattered a lot then.
yeah, but yeah, we just didn't watch MTV. We didn't listen to the radio in the car, or not that I remember. I remember being at like a swimming pool or something and hearing Edge of 17, but it didn't affect me in any way. I just thought it was weird that they said Dove in a song. I was like, I remember that, and now I have to play that song for the rest of my life. We'll talk about that too. But yeah. So it really hit me, and I just really did not get anything about it. That's an interesting thing too, is as much as I heard that song and immediately wanted to do that and was like, that's what I want to do. That's all that I want to do. And I tell people this all the time when I teach, I started with no natural ear for music. I had no ear for pitch whatsoever. If you played two notes, I couldn't tell you whether those notes went up or went down.
Oh wow.
I literally couldn't. and I had no natural rhythm. And so I was just starting like fumbling in the dark trying to figure this out because I just didn't have any natural ear.
But you eventually became a drummer too, right?
Yeah, I play drums.
Yeah.
Yeah. But my point is, you can teach yourself all of that.
Yeah.
It's not, oh, I don't have a very good ear. But you can teach yourself to have a good ear. Like now I have a relatively good ear. My wife, well, she can hear a melody and just play it for you on the piano. So that's humbling. But yeah, I started just fumbling in the dark and I had no idea how any of it worked. And just, it made me, it's part of why I dove into music theory so much early on was like, I needed the theory because I couldn't hear the notes. So I needed to do it almost paint by numbers.
Like mathematically.
Mathematically, yeah. And then later, of course, you develop the stuff.
Were you good at math in school?
No, just musically, like
That was just how it clicked for you.
it just clicked for me. Yeah, it made sense. It was just like, oh, okay. And music theory is easy. It's not even math is making it sound too hard. There's only so many notes. So like really it's not
In our Western.
yeah, absolutely.
That's a whole other thing.
Oh God. I had to produce an Indian track, reproduce like an Indian hit thing. And I did it, but I couldn't figure it out for the life of me. Like I was just literally like playing the track and then going, okay, so there was a little drum there, play it. Okay, there was a little drum there, a little bit. I couldn't count it. I couldn't figure it out. I was just literally copying what was going on. It took forever. But yeah, that was my early stuff. And then, gosh, yeah, we were just following around these guys.
So you met John and you start to realize how records are made.
Right.
And like that, did that fascinate you right away? Like
Immediately, yeah.
almost like a puzzle.
I really started listening to. I remember the realization that, oh, because of that session with John, there's reverb and there's effects on things, right? It's not just we're not just hearing a dry whatever. There's a little, and yeah, I got really obsessed with that, and later got a 4-track, and was just obsessive making little recordings on the 4-track.
At what point do you start to explore like digital stuff?
Oh, way later. There was nothing digital.
By the time you were working with a really early version of Pro Tools.
Yes.
By the time I'm coming around in the early 2000s.
Yeah, we got. It depends on how you say digital. What we got first was ADATs, which are these huge tape machines that used VHS tapes. So they were like digital tape machines. And I guess now we're getting.
But that brought the cost of tape down. Considerably,
it did, yeah. And
like switching to an ADAT from.
And we got so. I did a bunch of records. I did a bunch of punk records on. For some reason, I got into. This is when I'm maybe 20, 22. Mm-hmm. I got into. It's probably right before I met you. I got into the. I don't know if it was Riot Girl, but it was these all-girl punk bands that were like at FSU. And so I did a bunch of records for them, and that was when we only had 8 tracks. And it was digital tape, but it wasn't like you could see it on the screen. It was just a tape machine. Right. But it was digital tape. And so we just had 8 tracks, so it was like 2 mics for the drums. It was very minimal, and they were live recordings, but that was my Steve Albini phase of just band in a room. But you do takes and takes and takes until you got a good one.
So when you first got like your first 4-track, are you just like recording like your friends' bands in high school and stuff like that?
No, exclusively either just messing around by myself or my band, my high school band, which at the time was Sudden Heaven. And that's interesting, talking about live stuff. We took it into our own hands, really. It was the start of a lot of things for me because we were 15, 16 years old. We couldn't get gigs anywhere. So what we started doing was going to places and going, hey, we'll rent this place out. Throw a sheet over the booze. We'll rent it for a flat fee. We'll give you $500 and then we'll sell tickets. And it blew up for us because we were the only game in town. If you weren't 18 or 21, these were the only shows you could go to. So it really was like, it was, I'm not saying people didn't like us, but we were also the only game in town. So very quickly we were selling 200 tickets and then 300, and then we were selling 400 or 500 tickets, and we just kept having to move higher and higher up. And we were sneaky because people would figure out, we'd be like, we'll rent your place for $500. We really don't need any staff. We'll bring in off-duty police officers, throw a sheet over the booze, whatever. And
What kind of rooms were you renting?
dude, we did VFWs. We did the women's club that had a ballroom that was over by Lake Ella. Where else? We did Fire and Ice, which was also the library at one point. Any place that would rent to us. We did the early Cow House one time, a couple times. They were actually very cool about it. But a lot of times places would, there was an art gallery in Railroad Square, just any place that had a room.
621 does some like comedy shows still now.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
In Railroad Square.
Yeah. But we would have to move around because they would think they were ripping us off, taking $500 for a rental, and then we'd load in 300-400 kids, and they'd be like, we got to renegotiate, and we're like, we're gonna go down the road, like we'll find somebody else But like I said, it was a great look into the music business in a way of being like entrepreneurs. Like if people aren't opening doors for us, we'll just open the door. We'll just figure it out. And that's ironic in that I was on a major label later, but like early on, we were just like, we're just going to do this ourselves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If we can't get anywhere, I think we started in like pizza joints or whatever, like just being like, and then it would pack up with kids. And then we had a long-standing weekly show at Hole in the Wall, which is now Leon Pub. And we would play Sundays like early, like 5 to 8 or something. With 2 or 3 other bands, and that would pack out. And then we were like, let's just rent places. And everything was fine until somebody got hit in the head with a guitar somebody threw in the audience. And then we were like, we probably need security. So we started getting off-duty police officers. And that went along great for years. And that was really my early live stuff. Like, it wasn't bar gigs. It was like shows.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like shows.
I can think of so many reasons why that wouldn't work now, though.
Oh, yeah.
Like insurance and
people didn't think about that stuff back then.
like attendance, even just like getting people to go anywhere now is like is so much harder,
dude.
I think, too. But
You were around in that era.
I saw it change.
Yeah, you saw it
before my
change.
eyes.
Yeah, it was, and I probably didn't because I was probably on the road around that time. But for a while, it was not a question of, are we going to go out and see shows this weekend? It's which shows are we going to go out and see? It's a given.
Even here.
It's a given that we're going out. Yeah, I'm talking about here. Are we going?
We had Club Down Under. We had the Cow House. We
Yeah.
had the Moon. The Moon was booking regular shows.
Everybody,
back then.
yeah. Everybody was like,
Even the Civic Center was getting pretty
starting to
decent
get some more shows. And everybody was like, we're definitely going out Friday and Saturday. So
Floyd's
was
was a staple,
the staple,
at
yeah.
that point,
I
for
mean,
local music especially.
So it was like, in a way, it was when it got into the Socialburn days and the No Address days, it was a given. Like, bottom of the barrel, you could draw 100 people, 150 people. And you were like, draw, but also half these people are going to be at Floyd's either way.
Right.
You know what I mean?
There to see
They're
whoever's
just
playing.
whoever's playing.
Yeah.
But it was, and I feel for bands now, and I'm still in bands and in a couple of original bands. It is so hard to draw, and you see these people work, and they can maybe draw 35 people. And back then, it was just like, it was easy. It wasn't easy, but it was like possible.
It made me look real good when I would be passing out flyers and then 700 people would show up at Floyd's.
And it would just like, and you would get crowds like that, and it wasn't even weird. You weren't like,
No.
oh my God. It was like, of course, that's what we do.
Yeah. And it didn't matter if it was like a football weekend. Like, none of that seemed to matter. Really.
No, that crowd wasn't really following football. It was, I think a lot of people did really cool things. And now, of course, we're talking about the Floyd's days.
That's how it goes.
Yeah, we're all over the place.
Yeah, that's fine.
But they did a better job. And I've told people Denver, it's one thing Denver doesn't do, but they did a better job of, if you were a band in the scene and you were playing regularly, it was a given that you could get into any show for free. And I'm not saying like in this like we were a big deal or anything, but it was just like it created a scene because you'd be like, sure, we'll just go see our buddies at Floyd's. You'd play a show at Floyd's and you'd look out in the audience and there'd be 20 or 30 other of the musicians in the scene because you'd get in and they wouldn't charge you to get in and maybe you get one drink. And it was like there was no barrier to, you could just go and it wasn't a big deal. And it was almost even became expected for you to go support your friends and stuff.
Yeah.
So it made a scene. And
and now I think it's not even in the budget. For the same reasons we were talking about.
And it may not
before,
be. Yeah, it may not
with
be.
like insurance.
Yeah, that
and
may be
like
totally fair.
all that stuff. I feel
Yeah.
like it's just the audience isn't there to support it either.
Right.
If you have 700 people, then you can let 50 people in for free.
Yeah, because it doesn't, just whatever. But Tallahassee got really such a scene going and so fans would come out because it was a scene. And if you really liked a band, you would go out because you would probably run into somebody from that band.
So then Creed happens here.
Creed happens. And
what kind of happened after that? Did it leave like a vacuum or did it? This is not something I really experienced.
Yeah.
I came in like right after that.
And the Creed guys are like 5 years older than me. So we didn't really have much to do with them.
No, but.
And to be fair, the bands I was in when Creed was blowing up, like I was aware of it, but I was much more in the Cowhouse kind of scene and in the more indie.
And they were Floyd's.
Weirdos.
100%.
And they were Floyd's.
Yeah.
So that kind of was.
Like their manager owned Floyd.
Yeah. And really great guy. Gave me some great advice a couple times. Not that I knew him well, but talked once or twice. And
yeah.
very savvy business guy. Anyway, they were just we knew it was happening, but it just wasn't our scene at the time. And but I think when they blew up, it really did. It did leave a huge vacuum, but then B, I think it lit a weird fire that like, oh, we can do this. Like people from our little town, and I never saw Creed live or anything. And I would run into the guys around, and you'd be at a bar playing pool or something, and they'd be around and stuff. But they were a little older, so it's not like we like hung out. But anyway,
I'm not sure they're guys I would have hung out with anyway. I'm just not sure.
I will tell you, Mark Tremonti in particular is one of the nicest, coolest dudes. We later played with them live a few times when they were in Alter Bridge.
Oh yeah, Alter Bridge. Was,
and it's a funny story. The first time we played with Alter Bridge, we sound check, and then everybody's two opening bands. We're all standing around in a knot, and Mark walks over and he's like, "Hey guys, just want to introduce myself. I'm Mark," and we're all like, "Yeah, we know." What? Like he introduced himself like we're not all aware that you're Mark Tremonti. Yeah. You've been famous for quite a few years now. Like it's.
But I've thought about this exact kind of thing before. Is it weird? Is it weirder if he doesn't introduce himself?
It's weirder, but at the same time, it's just funnier. He's that down to earth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like huge rock star, multimillionaire, several projects he's gone platinum with, and he's just, "Hey, I'm Mark," not Mark Tremonti. He's like, "Hey, I'm Mark," and I'm like, everybody knows. Like, we're completely aware why we're here. We also saw the big marquee out front. Anyway.
The reason I asked is I felt like, and we'll get into exactly what happened in the early 2000s in the Tallahassee scene here in a few minutes, but I felt like there was definitely some weird impacts when 5 bands got signed and left. And I'm wondering how that compared, because you were in one of them, so I don't know that you really were aware of what was going on here after that. But
I think Creed blowing up was awesome. Certainly awesome for those guys, and certainly well deserved for John Kurzweg. But I think it really the two reasons are it made it look possible for the rest of us. It was not something it was the dream, but it was not something we really thought could happen in that way, in that mainstream way. We thought maybe you'll get in a van and you'll tour the cow houses of the country for long enough, and then maybe you'll get something.
And there were bands doing that.
And there were
from,
bands
from
doing it.
nowhere. And
Yeah.
the Drive-By Truckers are a good example of bands.
They're a great
that were doing
example. And I respect that. And but the blow up and the radio play and all of that stuff was not, that was like, oh, we could do that. And not in that way. And we would have never thought we weren't the same type of dudes and we didn't make the same type of music really, other than it was rock. But at the same time, it was just like, oh, that's doable. You know what I mean? And John made that record in his
Right.
house.
Right.
So, oh, you could make a record in your house that could have that kind of success and that kind of radio play. And it had never seemed real before.
Were you making other people's records before then?
That was probably right before I started making other people's
Do
records.
you think there was a connection there?
I think there was a connection there.
Because it sounds like to me, it not only made it seem possible for bands, but for a producer.
For producers. Yeah. And I'd been to John's house a million times, and that a record that sold millions and millions of copies, 6 million or whatever it sold. And and it was made in a place that like, I could probably go over there and knock on the door and just say, hey, what's up? You know what I mean? It's like there's not this huge barrier to entry. There's not this huge studio in LA, and there's not this whatever. It made it seem possible that like, you're going to have to work very hard because you're so far away from understanding how to do that, but it's doable. I think that was the impact of John and Creed, was like, oh, we could really do this.
So I'll tell you what I think happened after 5 bands left Tallahassee.
Okay,
and
I'm
it was
really
a different
interested.
time. It was a different time too, because I think what we already touched on what was already happening simultaneously, right? Like the internet, like people stopped buying records, they stopped buying CDs.
Totally,
the
they did.
internet is
Yeah.
taking over everything, whether it's distribution or even marketing, just like how people find out about things. But I think it actually killed the scene in Tallahassee for
Really?
a long time. And now I think there's other things going on. And what I saw was not, oh my God, it's possible.
Right.
On a long enough timeline, I saw 5 bands get chewed up and eaten alive by the machine.
We sure did.
I mean, that's really,
That
that's
is what
the
happened.
other side of,
Yeah.
That's what I saw. And I saw it happen to bands whose records came out and were successful, semi-successful, or bands whose records never even came out.
Yeah.
And were produced by crazy, like that Standstill record, I don't think ever came out, did it?
No.
And it was produced by one of Paul McCartney's producers.
Yeah.
Something.
I'm blanking on the guy's name. Yeah.
But so I just think it's, and I'm wondering how much of that, and we're not going to have the answers to this, but I'm wondering how much of that is like the environment in which it happened. I think the way I've seen, I've been thinking about this a lot just the last few days. The way I see it is the first time it was the same thing for the record labels.
Oh, they didn't see it coming.
Like, oh my God, we can find a band in small town, whatever, and make millions of dollars.
Oh,
off
yeah.
of it.
And
And they've been doing that a lot, but it was like a new way to do it, right?
yeah.
A new city for them to
Right.
pilfer,
Yeah.
if you will. And that's how I view it now. Like looking at it back 20 years later, 25 years later, I see them like make a bunch of money off of Creed. A bunch of guys here get stars in their eyes with good reason.
Yeah, sure.
And the labels descend upon the city and capitalize on that and basically just like strip those bands to the bone, leaving the Tallahassee with not much of a scene. And those guys, most of them did not go into music after that. A lot of them, some of them did.
Some of them did, but it was a meat grinder. And at the end of it, we were very broken people, speaking at least for the No Address guys.
And we can talk more about specifics another time off of this because I'm not trying to air anybody's dirty laundry.
No.
But you're not alone there.
I mean, I think who deserves the credit, if we're talking Tallahassee music scene, to me, is Creed, And then there was a gap, a couple year gap. It
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
like people came in.
No, it was at least 5 years.
Yeah, a couple years. And the guy who deserves credit is Neil All Day. All Day?
Yeah.
Yeah, from Socialburn, because they were the first ones to start getting some heat and getting some interest from labels. And Neil was a bulldog about harassing those label people that were interested in him to see other Tallahassee bands.
Sure.
He was the guy, I think, who eventually started the Feeding Frenzy and got it on their radar
Right.
that there was this scene happening, because I remember Neil would just be like, hey, on Socialburn, who you got to see is whoever. You need to get down here and see these guys. You need to get down here and see these guys.
And I want to be super clear. This was like a favor. This was a very good thing. This was a favor Neil was doing because he believed in.
No,
these bands
I'm
and-
giving him
Yeah,
the
yeah.
biggest praise possible. What a guy to do that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm going to take time out of my time to talk to you, to tell you about the bands that are in my town.
Right.
And dude,
I'm just being clear. I'm not suggesting that Neil was
no,
no, you aren't either, but
he was the best. And I think he's who put it on people's radar. And there were a few other things. And we had that one song that kind of blew up locally on radio. And that also I think that's what brought some other attention. Wait, this band's been on the local radio, whatever. And there were other things, but I think Neil started the ball rolling, or at least gave it a lot of momentum in the best way possible. And when you talk about like 5 bands getting major label deals right back to back, it was because they discovered.
yeah, I mean, it was, Terry Clark had a lot to do with
Terry,
that.
really, at the end of the day, Terry Clark deserves.
And those
Yeah.
two are pretty inseparable anyway. I mean,
Certainly at the time, I don't know.
they're still home. I'm in
that's
pretty
great.
good touch with them, and they're
Oh, that's great. I should be in better touch with Terry, or he's mad at me. I don't know.
I don't think
whatever.
I don't think Terry's mad at anybody.
Okay. Then he's changed.
He has changed a lot, man.
okay.
He is
Yeah.
mellowed the fuck out. For
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Now he's mad about that joke, but yeah.
I'm not cutting.
Sorry,
it.
Terry. I absolutely love the guy. I'm just so bad about.
But he was,
Yeah.
I think he was a key figure, and he'll be the first to tell you that he got that way. And he was protecting people as much as he was.
Oh,
he was ruthless, but it was to protect. People,
absolutely.
right. And he's somebody that took care of a lot of things that nobody even knew needed taking care of at the time.
Yeah.
But
And I'll give him credit. And I used to have these 3-hour-long conversations with Terry, and we'd goof around and laugh a lot. But Terry really changed the trajectory, maybe not of my career for sure. He came in and made some stuff happen. So I give him all the credit for anything I did. Terry was a big part of it, but he was a big part of how good I was able to be, however good that is. He was willing to tell me hard truths a number of times that other people would not have told you. Other people would have been like, that's too honest, that's too mean. And he would just cut right to it, and I would go, oh, okay, I will go work on it.
he convinced you to start playing guitar again when you started.
No, he did not.
Okay.
He did not, but that's how we met, because I met at a session with Bobby Salvaggio, producing.
Yeah.
And it was a time when I was playing both drums and guitar on a record, on the Stash record. So I played both drums and guitar on that record because our guitar player quit. So I was like, I'll just play the guitar parts because I wrote a lot of them. And then I met on the day, and Terry may not remember this, and I may be misremembering this, but it's one of my favorite memories. I was doing the drums, and then got done doing the drums, and Bobby was like, okay, let's switch over and have you do the guitar. And Terry, I could hear Terry. I hadn't met Terry yet, but I could hear them talking and laughing in the control room, which was all cool. And then I play the guitar part, and then Bobby clicks in, and I hear Terry go, who the fuck is this guy? Like,
I can hear it.
yeah. And and I'm so proud of that. If that is true, I am so proud of that, because I was like, oh. And then later when I met Terry and stuff, and so that was a big, And Stash brought some heat, to be fair. We were talking to several label people right before it just imploded and we couldn't quite get there. But we were talking to some label people. And so I
Yeah.
think that brought some eyes on the scene. But I think you're right. Ultimately, I even heard people say that this is like a new Seattle,
Right.
way
But
smaller.
what was so unique about what was going on here? Because there's 5 bands that are getting, and really more like probably 7 or 8 that are getting like pretty. There's 5 that ended up getting deals.
Yeah, but there were a lot
But there wasn't like a unified sound.
at all.
None of these bands
It was
sounded
all-
alike at all. Like Presence was like a rap rock band.
Yeah.
That sounded
Yeah.
like Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah. And then
esque.
Socialburn was just great songwriting rock.
Yeah, but like catchy
Catchy hooks.
Yeah, y'all were like almost like a classic rock
A little bit of a classic rock.
revival.
Yeah,
but
kind of band.
but like with a modern sound.
Yeah, yeah.
But
And Stand
guitar
Still,
solos
whatever.
were important. Drum, like you guys were, I think you guys were all for the most part a little bit older than some of these other guys.
We
in
were.
the band.
We-
So it felt to me like y'all were like the musical leaders.
We were a little more musician-y.
That's what I mean.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
y'all were like the band that was like full of real musicians, and not to
Well,
say
I mean,
these guys
yeah.
weren't.
But I get what you're saying. But we were all a little older
seasoned,
and had played in a bunch of other bands.
Yeah,
And, you know,
and some of y'all had played together before,
sure,
and like you
Yeah.
and Phil had been playing for years,
forever with breaks. But
and Ben was a poet,
yeah,
and that I think all of those things put together, I think elevated y'all like in the eyes of the scene to the other bands. And this is just my perspective as a kid back
which
then.
I don't have much of. So go.
It was like they all kind of looked up to y'all.
Okay, I had no idea.
Not like in a commercially successful way, or anything,
Right,
but like
yeah,
in
yeah.
like, these guys know what the fuck they're doing.
Huh? That's interesting.
In
yeah.
in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I really didn't. Yeah, I really didn't know that.
Stand Still's like very melodic, and anyway, there was no unified sound.
No, and that was what was so interesting. It wasn't a Tallahassee sound. It was all these different things. It was just more about that there was a scene, and that I remember being sometimes with. I don't want to name too many names just because my memory is as bad as it is, but I remember being at Floyd's for something and being with a couple label guys and them looking around at the crowd and going, "Whoa, people are showing up for this."
Yeah,
And I'm
yeah.
like, yeah, people show up for this. And they were like very impressed by that because a lot of times record label guys are enthralled with the idea of shooting fish in a barrel. And they're like, oh, people actually like this. They're showing up for this. And that was very impressive to them. Not that bands, it was interesting because we used to trade shows with bands in like Orlando and all over. And you really wouldn't get the crowds like you were getting at Floyd's. People other places were doing okay, but you'd trade shows with them and you'd be like, oh, okay, 150 people, whatever. There was something going on here.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no, there really was. Because I remember y'all would trade shows with bands in Gainesville a lot.
Yeah, Gainesville.
And Orlando. And I would ride with y'all to those shows.
Yeah.
And they would always be kind of disappointing.
Yeah.
In the sense that there'd be like 150 people, but it would be like this band, if this is the biggest band in this scene or whatever,
Right.
Wow, like we really did have something pretty unique
Yeah.
going on. I remember a show at the Blowhole, which was like the back room of the Purple Porpoise,
Sure.
in Gainesville.
Yeah, I
And
remember.
the sound guy there was like one of the coolest motherfuckers we'd ever met.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, what was that guy's name? Doesn't matter. Go on.
But there was maybe 30 people there that night.
Yeah.
It was weird.
That was usually.
And then I think we found out there was like a big show across the street or down the road. But still, like, nobody acted like it was weird.
Yeah.
But us.
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
nobody came out.
Presence worked Gainesville to the point that they would blow it up, but they were blowing it up for Presence. It wasn't like the show trading thing where you're
Yeah.
opening for the big band, and it was just on their own.
Well, Presence really, they were a band for a long time before they got there. I think they were maybe the band that had been around the longest. out of that group. That
Oh,
got
definitely.
Because I think they had 2 or 3 records.
I played with them in a totally different band, although Phil was in it. We split a bill with them at whatever that weird venue on FSU campus was, not Potbelly's, but the Candy Store or something.
Sweet Shop.
Sweet
I
Shop.
remember that show.
Yeah, and it was us.
I hit my head on one of
us
the
and
TVs.
Presence.
And Fetch.
Oh, and Fetch. Weird. Okay. Yeah, no,
I remember that show.
Yeah, that was so that had to have been 96, 97. So Presence had been at it for at least 5 years before things started going great for them. But yeah, there was just a thing going on where all these completely different bands could just be in the same scene.
So let's back up for a second.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
started naming some of the earlier bands that you recorded. Let's just go through the list. How many of these bands did you either produce or engineer?
I won't remember a lot of them, and I'll apologize because, like, I was doing a lot of.
Yeah, I remember
yeah.
you were doing 5 or 6 records at the same time.
Sometimes, yeah. And I worked at such a pace back then. I was often working 12, 16 hours a day all the time in the studio.
I don't think you slept.
Not much. I actually had a period there where I didn't sleep. I only napped. I would just go until I needed to nap, and I would just go lay down for an hour. And then you'd pop out to Floyd's for an hour or two and see whatever was going on there, and then head back to the studio. Yeah. And anyway, very early stuff I did, there was a band that I remember because the songwriting was so good. If you can find it, I will not stand behind the recording because didn't know what I was doing yet. But the songs are amazing. There was a band called Miss July.
Oh, yeah. I remember that band.
Yeah. Gosh, just amazing songs. Campbell Austin.
I think I have those records.
Oh,
sitting around
dude.
here.
I don't want to hear it.
No, but
Yeah,
it
yeah.
would be cool to probably look at them.
Yeah. I don't want to hear it because the recording's probably not good. Yeah, the Tatas. There were a handful of these bands that I started early on, and then when I started doing
Loved the Tatas back in the day. Like I remember,
really did.
I remember
really
you
did.
telling me how great
I
they
thought
were.
they were amazing. Another recording, I viscerally remember what I did wrong on.
That's how we get better. Though.
That's how you get better, and that's why I was trying to do it so often. Because either John or Terry said to me, like, you got to make 30 records before they start sounding good. Somebody told me that. And like I had that number in my head that I just need to keep grinding these things out. But to get into the later stuff, the first big break I got, and I don't remember what the circumstances was, but DJ from Presence knew that I was producing, and I hadn't done a project that big or that was supposed to be that mainstream yet. But he asked me to produce When the Smoke Clears.
Yeah.
And I had to borrow a bunch of gear to do it, to record the drums and stuff. And thanks to Rob Gilmore and Terry Clark. And I think Terry Clark drum teched that, which was a big help. And yeah, so I did that When the Smoke Clears. And we did that record really fast because I'll give Presence a lot of credit. Those guys rehearsed. So doing that record was actually really easy because they would just come in and they had their parts down. And
their shows were so tight, too.
Unbelievable. Yeah. If you saw them live, you were an instant fan.
Yeah. Even if you didn't really like that kind of music.
They just were like, so if they'd gotten the chance to get in front of 1 million people, they would have made 1 million fans. They were just that magnetic. And the interplay of the guys, they had it all, chemistry. Anyway, we did that record, and I remember I think I got $800 because at this time I was doing records for literally you tell me what your budget is. I just want to do the record. Or sometimes it was like literally my bills for this month are $1,200 or something because I was living pretty slim. But my bills are, and I've already made $600, so I can do your record for $600. I just got to cover my overhead. And so I think I got $800, and then we had a back end deal where I was going to get like $1 a record or something that they sold. And then they got signed almost immediately after they put that record out. I don't remember the circumstances, but
yeah, it was fast.
It
It's
was really
within
fast.
a year.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe even shorter because I remember they had sold, I don't know, maybe they sold another 800 or so.
Because their first record, because this was their second record.
It was the
wasn't it?
second
Yeah.
record.
Their
Yeah.
first record, I think they sold out of it and had
They
to,
did. Yeah. They did. And that was the big, man, if they sell 2,000 of these and I get $2,000, that's going to be amazing. That's where I was at the time. But they got signed before they did that. And I will give the label credit. They did pay me out for the unsold stock.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
And yeah, so did those guys. And I didn't produce Social Burn, but John was lucky enough to, John was lucky enough. I was lucky enough that John let me work on what later became their first record. Just a little bit. I did some editing and stuff.
The major label one, or What a Beautiful Waste? Or
No,
'cause they had
did.
What a Beautiful Waste, and then World Outside, and then
It was
their big.
It was the major label one.
Yeah, you were an engineer on that.
I was an engineer on that, and I didn't. The stuff I worked on, they weren't officially working on the record yet, but it was stuff that later wound up on the record.
Right.
John did half the record, and then they did a deal, and then they finished the record, and I worked on the early stuff. And I remember going to the store and buying that album in the store and like opening it up and seeing my name on the thing, and I was like, oh,
Same.
I made it.
Same.
Really?
Yeah. I'm in the thank yous. I'm not in the credits.
Still,
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
just like, oh my God. You can't imagine. Now it's so easy to see your name somewhere with the internet and stuff. Of course, your name's all over the place.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. But that was such a trip to be like, oh my gosh. And then, God, I don't know. I was doing no address stuff the whole time. We did a lot of recording.
You recorded a whole album that you produced that never even got pressed, right?
Here's the story on that. And
Songs from a Warehouse in Orange Avenue.
we did that, and that got us signed, and we didn't release that. Then I did Standstill and Drake Equation. And,
Oh yeah, Drake Equate. I remember those guys. Man.
Yeah. That was they had some good stuff.
Pierce ended up, I think, playing with like Of Montreal and
Yeah,
stuff
that's
like
right.
that.
He did. Yeah. I think it was them. Not. I always mix up Metric and Of
It
Montreal.
was Of Montreal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not that those bands sound similar. I think they just both have M's in their names. But yeah, I did a ton of stuff. You could probably remember almost better than. But the thing with No Address was, yeah, we did that record and didn't put it out, and then because we got signed,
And it was a great record, man.
Thank you.
It really was. Like,
and
from top to bottom, like great songs. It
thanks.
sounded great.
Yeah.
And I remember, I mean, you were obsessed with
Yeah.
making it
yeah,
sound good. I honestly, that may have been what made me realize I did not want to be a record producer.
oh really? Yeah,
In a way, yeah.
yeah.
When I saw, especially with the tools back then that you had to work
Right.
with, like fixing drums, for instance.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
was, like, I think like fixing drums was like the bane of your existence for like 6 months.
Oh, it took hours and days. Yeah.
And I would just that 1,000-yard stare that veterans get
Yeah.
when they get back.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had that
I bet
when you
that-
would talk about drums.
I bet that I did. Yeah. Because it was so manual. And if you wanted to, when that was what records sounded like at the time, if you wanted to add in a little sample under the real snare, you had to go in and manually paste that. You just copy and paste, and you'd have to zoom all the way in, paste that, zoom all the way out, go to the next hit, zoom all the way in, and it would take, who knows? I would just stay up all night doing that. Yeah, and that was really, there were a lot of things going on, but us putting that record out was what finally made somebody jump as far as signing us, because they were like, wait, we don't want you to put that record out, blah, 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 and then we're going to put that record out.
I think y'all had album art picked
We had
out.
the art.
It was like being
We were ready to go,
pressed, yeah.
and they were like, "Whoa, we'll sign you," because we were like, "Unless there's a deal, we're just going to put it out," which is a good music business lesson. Like, you gotta have something that's puts them in a corner.
Yeah.
before they're going to make a decision. If they
Yeah.
think they've got all the time in the world, they're just not going to make a decision. But if they've got it, we got to do it now or not. It's like what made them jump. And then one thing that we did with No Address, and it's why we did so much recording, was you were talking about the music business was not doing well. 2004, this is before 2004, but we knew. So basically, what kept us on the label for the like 2 years before we went and actually made the real record, was we were kicking them demos every month. New songs every month, 2-3 songs, fully produced demos. This could go on the radio tomorrow. Every month, we were just kicking them a couple new songs, and that kept their interest level peaked in when we were seeing other bands that we knew or hearing about other bands on the Atlantic roster getting dropped or whatever. We were like, dude, we need to keep them interested. If we had just gone away and waited quietly, we would have gotten dropped. So we knew we've just got to keep cranking these songs out. Partially, we were also just writing songs to make sure we wrote the best one. Our joke was, we knew John Kurzweg was going to produce the record, and so our joke was, let's write them all and let John sort them out. We were just like, let's not. We're just going to keep going, and we wound up writing and demoing like 90 songs. Anyway, the reason we did Let It Out was because I knew we were about to go leave to do the record, and it was going to be months and months before we got them any new material. So I was like, dude, we need to drop a whole album on them. That album was made expressly for Atlantic Records to keep them interested while we were in the studio. So
That's crazy.
We wrote and produced that whole album in 19 days. And then right before we left, dropped it on the desk. Bam, here's a whole other album. And that's what kept them interested through the troubles of...
Because in the background, just for everybody,
Yeah.
this is when Warner, Elektra, and Atlantic merge.
Right.
And like for 24 hours, you don't even know if your album's coming out. You don't, like weeks. You know,
I think we were...
Nobody knew anything at a certain point.
Yeah.
And like the roster of all three of those labels shrunk.
Oh, yeah.
Tremendously overnight. I'm wondering, how did y'all stay so productive through that time? Like, what was driving? Was it desperation?
Oh,
Was
yeah. That's a good question, man. It was, to me, like, I guess it was several things. I just wanted it so bad. And like, my goal wasn't to be a rock star. My goal was to be a rock star so that then I could be a big deal producer. Like, I saw that as my stepping stone. Like, I make this band successful and then I can write my own ticket. So that was my goal.
I remember a conversation we had back in the day where you're like, and I don't know that you were talking about any one particular record.
Yeah.
But you're like, you make the record that the label wants.
Right.
And then eventually you're going to get to make whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah. And
goal.
I think
the goal is just to be able to get creative control.
Get creative freedom and get in a point where, and don't get me wrong, I fought with the label over the eventual No Address record.
Oh, yeah.
So,
of course,
But, so I was driven by that, and then I was driven, by desperation. And then also, this was like I got Captain Ahab about it. Like, it really became like my white whale. Like, I really thought Ben Lauren was good enough and had enough to say that I just had to get it out there. I had to provide a launching pad to get that out there. And it really was like almost like a mania. I was just like, I was obsessed. I lost girlfriends over it. I was just going to do anything to get there.
I don't think you were the only person that felt that way.
Yeah.
About Ben in particular.
Yeah. I hope not.
I felt that way about all of you, but definitely about there was something, and Ben and I we keep in touch. We're still buddies or whatever, and I know y'all are tight too, but there was something just really special about his presence,
Yeah.
especially back then.
And
in that environment, on that stage.
we had to work on it a lot. Don't get me wrong. We had to work we had to work on it a lot.
Sure.
We developed him a lot, and
his lyrics.
oh yeah, absolutely. And my attitude was always like, hey, what I'm really excited about is where is this 3 records down the road? Like maybe this is
Right.
cool
Right.
and it's cool enough for now that we can get to the next thing, but if we keep doing this, I really think something crazy special is going to happen. And so that was always my view. And we'd write stuff and you'd be like, okay, it's good, fine, it's good enough. Let's get to the next one. Let's get to the next one.
But also, if you take like the early stuff and the later stuff, like you had evidence to suggest that you were right.
I think I was.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
you guys progressed in a way that I think,
That was,
and I think this is what I was talking about earlier, where the other bands looked up to you. I don't think any band in Tallahassee grew as much as a band than y'all did.
that's super nice to say, but that is one of the things I liked the most about that band is it was evolving and it was constantly changing, and we had a lot of tricks in our pocket. And that was one of the advantages of that band was you did have 5 killers, each in their own way.
Sure, yeah.
It was just
Randy was
monster
like
drummer,
a fucking rock star,
monster,
presence,
yeah.
you know, like the whole 9 yards.
Still probably, other than Barry from Shinedown, probably the best drummer I've ever actually made music played with.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
still,
And I think he's
I
a
put
studio drummer now. I think that's
put
his
him
job.
neck and neck with.
He's not
Yeah.
somebody I've kept up with.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I think at least for a long time he was
He
a
toured.
studio drummer.
He
for a
toured
long time.
with. He toured with Pat Travers.
Oh wow.
Boom Boom Out Goes the Lights. He toured with him for like 5 years after No Address. A band called Carolina Liar. They had some big MTV hit. Yeah, he toured for years after No Address. Completely pro drummer. But yeah, I loved that the band evolved and that.
Phil's harmonies were always just so fucking gold, man. Anyway,
And his guitar tones.
yeah.
You know, he's not a shred 'em up guitar player.
Oh no.
But he thinks outside the box and he'll come up with parts that work, but no one else would have thought of that. And then his tones are just like still even. We jammed recently a year or two ago, and just man, that guy, he just like plugs in a guitar and plays an A chord, and you're just like,
And Bill just was always in the fucking pocket, man.
And another guy
Always.
who was never playing what you would expect. Like sometimes his bass lines would be like, dude, no one else on earth could make that bass line work. Like it is totally in the pocket. It's not poking out. It's the perfect part for the song, but no one else would have thought to play that. That's a weird thing to play, but it works. I would say more than anybody, Bill was like why No Address sounded different, because he was so not a standard rock bass player.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Because he was so influenced by the Beatles and Zeppelin and this older school of bass playing that was more moving around and more melodic and more kind of arpeggios and stuff. And it's why No Address sounded a little different and funky and weird, was because he wasn't always just doing the which I love that kind of bass playing.
I feel like the only other band that was doing that kind of stuff in the 90s, like other than Primus or something,
Yeah.
like Cracker.
Yeah. And
I just had their bass player on.
oh, awesome. Dude, I'll have to watch that. Yeah, or the way that, what's his name from Stone Temple Pilots? Rob DeLeo.
Yeah, Rob, yeah.
He was another bass player that was just playing like James Jamerson Motown bass lines over rock stuff, under rock stuff. And it made the band sound really different. And I think Bill really was the reason No Address always had that like left of center sound, was the bass was just doing something that you were like, huh? Even more than like Ben's vocals or whatever, like Bill's bass playing is really what made that band sound the way it did.
And Ben's vocals, like sometimes he would sound like Jeff Tweedy, and sometimes he would sound like Kurt Cobain.
Yeah,
He was really
yeah.
versatile
And
and
yeah.
emotional
And dude, I'll tell you, one of those, I feel like occasionally I can do it. Like, we met non-musically, and then anyway, I was like, yeah, I'll jam with you. And then the first second I heard him sing, I was like, we got to get you a band. Just, it's such a, I'm a sucker for those unique voices where you're just like, oh, maybe you don't sound like a good singer. I'm not saying Ben doesn't sound like a good singer, but you sound like immediately recognizable.
yeah.
The Tom Waits of the world and stuff like that. I'm immediately like, oh, I love that voice that you're like, whatever it is, I know exactly who that is immediately. It's not like a nice, smooth, hey, you're a great singer, but that could be any one of 6 people. But no, that's the only guy that sounds like that. And you just don't hear it that often. But yeah, I love it. But yeah, going full circle, that's what we did, was just write and write and demo and demo. And that's what kept us on the label, and that's what got us to the record as the record industry was
It sounds like
imploding.
it also is what kept you sane.
Yeah, in some degree. Yeah, yeah. And I would definitely say, to be fair, and I had to deal with this later in life, I was absolutely, for a while there, a workaholic. I was using that to deal with all of my feelings and all the things that were going on in my life.
Yeah.
I could just go in the studio and focus on that and not have to live a real life and be an adult or deal with past pains and traumas and stuff that I'd still not dealt with. So for a long time there, I was absolutely a workaholic. Like, I was definitely using that.
I think back, it was almost like a compulsion. Like it was
Yeah.
like you would be out and like as soon as your obligations at a show were over,
Yeah.
like you were like, I remember we did Albany one time and
Oh, yeah.
you were like riding back that night after the show from Albany. And I was like, yeah, I think I better it was just like one of those nights where something and I feel like there was some things that ended up happening that night that it was good that I left.
No,
Just like
yeah.
weird whatever. Young I
Yep.
was still pretty young. And so I rode back with you, but you literally were just going like you were just going back to work on records.
Yeah, yeah. It was how I was dealing with everything in my life. And like I said, I had to then later figure it all out as a somewhat normal person. But that was how I was just, doesn't matter, doesn't matter, doesn't matter. Got to get back to the studio. Got the records matter, doesn't matter, doesn't matter. Girl breaks up with you, doesn't matter. Got to keep making records. Just that was how I was dealing with life, and honestly, like, past trauma and stuff from like high school and stuff that I hadn't dealt with.
Yeah.
I was just shoving it down with Pro Tools. You know what I mean? It just,
I think there was this. Just speaking of like, and this is just something I've thought of recently. Speaking of like high school trauma, like I didn't really go to high school,
yeah,
and
I kind of remember that.
and I think when I met y'all, I was in middle school.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but you'd think that the kid hanging out with the bands and going to bars and stuff and clubs would like other people would think that was cool.
Right.
But no, they fucking hated me.
Yeah,
Like, because it's
yeah.
like anything that they can find to
Totally.
pick on you about, they're
Yeah.
gonna pick on you about. I feel like I probably like people would hate the bands I was hanging out with just because I was hanging.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I guess my point is that like the only place I felt like I belonged
Right.
was at your studio, at Floyd's, like at the warehouse on Orange Avenue.
Yeah.
Like, that was home to me. That was where I fit in.
Yeah. And I didn't even feel all that comfortable around the other bands, at least in a hanging out sense. When it was in a controlled environment, when it was in a recording studio and I was in charge of it, Adrian and I, my partner, Adrian, we often talk about that's one of the reasons that not the only reason, but it's one of the reasons that performers sometimes perform. And you, as a performer, a comedian, you might know what I'm saying. Why we want to perform and why we love performing is that as introverts and uncomfortable people, it's a social interaction that A, has a defined time, and B, I am in control of the
And there's,
social
like,
interaction.
rules.
Yeah, there's rules, right? So it's not just like randomly going into a room full of people. It's like we know when it starts, we know when it ends, and there's rules for how it goes, and I'm in control of the situation. Not like I need to be in control, but what's important is like I'm running the what's going on in this social interaction as the performer, right? And so
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
one of the things that draws us to performing. And I'll tell you, I don't care how many people there are in a crowd, I'm way more comfortable on stage than I am chit-chatting at a table with some people. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like I'm way more comfortable with that.
And I would say I'm usually like, as someone, as a comedian, yes, I agree,
Yeah.
100%. As a fan, though,
Right.
I also agree.
Oh, really? Yeah.
It's different when you're actually friends with the guys playing or whatever, but I don't really want to. I talk to people that I love and respect on this podcast
Yeah.
all the time, but it's not because I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to meet them or to talk to, like, I'd almost rather not.
You're right. Yeah, you don't want to. Yeah.
It's weird, but I think it's important to talk to. I think that I do it for other reasons. But if I don't have, I don't really want to talk to the guy whose songs I love my whole life. And I'll go say hi and get him to sign my poster after the show, but I don't want to go hang out with him.
Yeah.
Like I feel like that's too much for both of us.
Yeah. Dude, this gets thrown around a lot, but I think in my case it's true. I have a ton of imposter syndrome. So that makes it hard for me to hang out with other dudes. And I never feel like I'm the cool guy. Everybody seems cooler to me than me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And whether or not that's true, I know that doesn't matter. Like that's a dumb way to
Right.
think. But nonetheless, especially when I was younger, I definitely felt a lot of that. And I was like, and I love all those guys, and I wish I would have spent more time hanging out with them, but I just always felt these are the actual cool kids, and I'd love to get back to my little cave because I don't necessarily belong around these guys. On one hand, you're like, I do. It's so funny. I'm very two sides of a coin.
I think we all felt that way.
Yeah.
But that's what united us in a way.
Maybe
You
so.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like none of us really felt like we belonged.
Yeah.
And I think there's exceptions to that within the scene or whatever. But
Sure.
I think when you're talking about, so I've talked about this a lot here, where I think like comedians and musicians are cut from the same cloth, like 100%.
Yeah.
And I even tell a joke that like all comedians wish they were rock stars.
Yeah.
And most rock stars wish they
were funny. Yeah.
were comedians.
Yeah.
Shane Moss was the exception. And I was like, yeah, I can tell you don't want to be a rock star. But
yeah.
I think that there's a lot of truth to what you're saying, but I think that's part of why, especially comics and musicians have always run together anyway. But I think that's why. And I think it's partially why, like, the feeling that you're talking about is like the thing that made us all be where we were when we were, like.
Yeah, and that was part of the drive too, is if I can, and it wouldn't have helped.
Because I felt like I belonged more with y'all than I did at high school, at least. But there was also, I'm wondering, something you said, I'm wondering if for me, it was like, I'm going to hang out with these people that are clearly cooler than me.
Yeah.
So then I never have to, I'm like, it's not like I'm like competing.
Oh, the spotlight's not on you.
Yeah, like I don't have to, I
Yeah.
can hide in the shadows.
I bet that was part of it.
I think to a degree, it also, I just fucking love the show.
You too, man. And I
just love the thing, man.
Yeah. Which I guess, and I love the show.
The buzz.
I do love it. I love the show, and really, it's turned out later in life that I found out like I'm addicted to performing. Like I do need to perform. not really for the fans. It's really about the high I get from doing it,
Hmm.
and I need it. But Adrian and I will talk about sometimes around the holidays. Not this year. I have to run home and do a couple shows, but around the holidays when we might get a month, maybe more, with no shows because it's just the holidays and whatever, and you start getting irritable and depressed, and we'll be like, "Why do we feel so bad?" And it's, "Oh yeah, we haven't played a show in 6 weeks."
Yeah.
And it's just like, because it just, I don't know, it cleans you out and you just go for it as hard as you can. And yeah, so I haven't told you this, and I can't believe I almost waited this long to say, Adrian and I are writing a book about stage performance,
Oh, wow.
and
Hell yeah.
it's going to be called A Show with a capital S, because we were talking about, you go see people play music, and that's cool, and they play music for a set amount of time, but it's not a show.
Yeah.
And there's something about a show, and it's about, we're just look at all the boilerplate stuff, like the technique of how you move on stage and the technique of how you block and you move around stage with your other people. And I've coached stage performance for years now, and we've developed a system for a lot of things. But it's also just about the why of why we perform, like what's the drive and finding the why. And the central thing we found in the book, and I'm sure you get this as a performer, there's your sweet spot, or where it works. The spot where it works is where what the audience wants and what you want as a performer lock in together, where you find that place where you meet, where what the audience wants out of you and what you want to do intersect. That's what a great performance is, a great room is.
Have you ever performed solo in any capacity?
No.
It just dawned on me that I'm not sure like when you would have. It's just not.
No, I never have.
Do you think you would want, I mean, if there was a reason for you? Let's assume that there was like a reason for you to.
It might come up and I might do it, but I'm so interested in the interaction with band members, and I'm a side guy. I always wanted to be a side guy. That's when I figured out that the intro to Walk This Way was the side guy. I was like, cool, that's who I want to be. Or when I saw a picture of the Rolling Stones and was like, Mick, and oh man, he's super cool. And then wait, who's this guy to the left? That's the guy. That's the guy. And I always wanted to be that guy. And I've always specialized in supporting singers. That's what I do as a guitar player, is I support singers. And that's what I base all my decisions on. And so it would be boring to me. I've definitely done like duo stuff. Like Adrian and I did duo stuff.
But you don't feel like you're ever working like insecure about the idea, though.
No,
It would be
no.
artistically, you
It would be fine.
Not interested.
I'm just not interested.
Yeah,
I'm interested
yeah.
in the interplay. I'm interested in.
I've talked to some songwriters
Yeah,
that
yeah,
do
yeah.
have reason to play solo.
Yeah.
And they compare it like it's like to them it's like the closest thing they've done to stand up.
Oh, yeah.
Where performing all by themselves, but it's terrifying to them. Whereas if they're playing with a band, those are very different things.
Oh, they're very different.
They're playing with a band, then it's like they have their security blanket.
Yeah.
And they play solo, and it's like the hardest thing they can possibly do.
And I'm just, even like this, I like back and forth. I like the collaboration is what's inspiring to me. And even as a songwriter, like I am a songwriter, I wouldn't write a song by myself for myself.
Yeah, you probably saw there was some early episodes where it was just me talking about a topic. Yeah. I've stopped doing that here. I don't know
Which
if
you can do it if you needed to put it
right.
Yeah.
But I might just move it to move it to its own podcast.
Yeah.
I think. But yeah, it's just the collaboration, the back and forth, it's way more interesting.
It's way more interesting, and that's what I always. And I'm always like a de facto. I shouldn't say this. It sounds cocky to say. I wouldn't say I'm a band leader, but I like a little bit like running the band from stage, or a lot of times, especially in the early days of the tribute band I play with, the Petty Nicks Experience. Adrian calls it sheepdogging, because often I'll be moving around the stage and watching for people spacing out or losing their energy or whatever. And I'll go over and, hey, get it up, buddy, get it up. Or I love to stomp the stage right by somebody. If you, especially on a
Wake them up.
wake them up, especially on a wood stage or a metal stage, you can get their jaw to clack. Like if you do it, if you just wait and stomp, it's almost like double bouncing somebody on a trampoline when you're a kid, because the stage has a little bit of give, and you could just pop them and their jaw will click, and they're like, you're like, yeah, stop slacking off, man. And so that's like super. I don't know. That kind of thing is what inspires me to do it. And I love the crowd thing, but it's not about the adulation of the crowd. If anything, what I love with the crowd, and this is, I'm sure has happened to you, there's that moment where a room full of people, however many people, locks into being a crowd.
Yeah.
And then now we've got them. Not we've got them, but
we're like a new thing.
But it includes you as the performer.
Right.
I like to say, this sounds really, I like to say there's actually, when things are working right, there's an illusion that this performer and the audience are two separate things. That's almost an illusion. It's everybody in the same room vibing together when it's working. It's the crowd's giving you energy, you're giving it back to the crowd and amping them up, then that energy is amping you up, and it's this circular.
That's super true for stand-up for me, because if the crowd's not into it, I'm just like, okay, I just want to get through my time.
Yeah.
And then I'm not as electric. I'm not as, and if they're not laughing, then it like my confidence goes down.
Yeah,
and like,
you can't.
Like so many factors
Yeah.
go into it. Yeah,
And you can't blame them.
no.
Sometimes
It's like a negative feedback loop.
And then the loop goes negative. And you know what? It can be so many other factors that aren't you. Like I tell people all the time, if you ever get booed, which as a performer will almost never happen.
Not as a comedian.
As a comedian, I'm
but
sure.
we love it.
Yeah, I'm sure it's still, you're getting a reaction. So often when a crowd isn't into it, it's factors that aren't you. It's like you were doomed before you went up there. It's too hot. It's too cold. The wait staff is too slow.
Well, and one of the biggest things a comic can do is figure that out before they go on stage, whatever that problem is.
Yeah.
And make fun of that problem.
Oh, yeah.
And then if you do that, then it's like you've cracked the code of the room.
Yeah.
But if you, as a band, like your songs aren't like made for making fun of the fucking,
we can't.
The tacos or whatever people are upset about,
But we do that too, because we'll be like, for example, there was a show recently, doesn't matter where it was, we're sitting backstage and the crowd was way too chatty and loud. They were too chatty and too loud, and we knew we need to go out there and hit them hard and shut them up as soon as possible so they will start paying attention to the show.
Yeah.
They're in a fine mood, but they're not in a, we're going to need to slap them across
They're
the
there
face.
to see each other, not us.
Yeah, and we need to get them focused. Not because we need the attention or whatever, but what's going to make the show good is getting these guys to, hey, this is what's going on. Let's change the mood of the room. And so we know going on stage, like, instead of the little ramp up thing we might do energy-wise, we need to pop them right out of the gate. And some of that is not changing songs. It's just your attitude going on stage. It's just the attitude of performing. We're gonna hit them with end of show energy from the first song, and then once you got it, you can back down and start doing the thing. But you just know you gotta. Or hey, these guys are a little lethargic. Don't worry about putting a lot of energy into it for the first 30 minutes. They're gonna warm up. They're just not even close to warmed up. Don't worry about hitting it hard. Let them just settle in, and we'll slowly ramp it. So over the years, I think I've just gotten better. I and Adrian and the rest of the guys have gotten better at reading crowds in that way. Or, man, sometimes you take your foot off the gas because you're just like, okay, these guys are officially too drunk at this point. They are no longer paying attention. We could be playing anything at this point. They're still dancing, or they're still up at the front, and they're still whatever. They're not scanning anything that's going on. So let's just.
Cowboy Mouth is one of the bands that I've seen never give up on a crowd. And, like, always fucking win.
Yeah. And
They're just one of the few that can do it.
Dude, I sometimes, the thing that gets me is I'm always like searching with the crowd in a way to find out where they are and then try to meet them there. And when a crowd gets too drunk, I can no longer find them.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? It's
Then
just,
you're-
it's just chaos coming back at me. Like and that's fine. And I'm glad they're having a good time. And it's not like I stop trying or stop playing hard, but it's like, I'm just like, okay, I can no longer find these guys and meet them. It's just, I don't know where they're at. And I don't mind it or anything, but you just start realizing those things where you're like, okay, that's where they're at. Let's give them the drunk version of this. This isn't, Adrian, for example, has a great story because it's a Petty Nicks band. We, of course, do Landslide, and she has this really great story that she'll tell right before that song. But when a crowd is in a certain place, she'll cut it short and just go, this is Landslide, because they are not in a mood.
They're not going to hear it.
They're not going to, or maybe they're not in a mood to hear.
Right.
And you just have to read. I'm sure as a comic.
Yeah, no, there's times where I'm like, all right, I'm going to get straight to the punchline of this long joke.
Yeah, because
And move on to this like crowd pleaser that
things
I know.
are moving too fast, and I just need to get to it.
Yeah, having that flexibility is, I think, one of that's probably something you talk about in your book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I want to shift just a little bit because
Anything you want to get to.
I want to talk about what you're talking about, but compared to 20 years ago.
Okay.
How have crowds changed? But also the other aspect of it is like, what were some of the challenges you faced in touring back then that don't exist now? What are some of the new challenges now? But also, like, how have crowds changed over the last 25 years?
I would argue that other than that when I think about it, that's not true. I think attention span is way down. I think people are often focused on capturing video and pictures and stuff. So you get a fair amount of the crowd who's not present in a certain sense because they're spending their time filming, I guess, for later consumption. I'm always like, where do these videos go? You know what I mean? Like, I never see them later.
Don't know, man.
Yeah,
I actually really appreciate it when bands and comics tell people like no filming. Or we'll give you can film us the last 3 songs or the first couple songs or whatever, and then we're done.
Which I had the funniest thing. We were playing this venue that we should not have been playing with Petty Nicks. It was just not a great setup for us, more of a bar than a whatever. And there were these 3 guys that were all filming the whole time. And then every time it would come to a guitar solo, which is my part, they would stop the video and put their phones down and wait patiently for the guitar solo to get over. And then they would start filming again. And they did that to me. They did that to me for 3 hours. 3 hours. Every time. I'm just like, go home and edit. Like, why do you have to? Like, I don't really care. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care. But
I'm wondering if they were just fucking with you.
it was almost like they were. Because they were right on my side of the stage. I was clearly in frame. Yeah. And I was just
They
like.
have these things called tripods, too. Like, if somebody's going to film a whole show, they can just
put it on a tripod and have fun. Yeah, I don't know. So
whatever, yeah.
That attention level has changed. I think once you get a show past a certain point, it's the same as it was. But I think attention spans are down. People are content fatigued. So in some ways, you've got to be a little snappier than you used to. You used to be able to get away with a little more wandering of a show. Now I feel like it does need to be a little snappier, but not wildly different. And once you get it past a certain point, yeah, it's pretty much the same. The same rules always apply, probably applied back in as long as there's a group of people. A group of people is a group of people. And it hasn't changed with time.
And people are people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and touring was weird because there were times when we were in front of crowds that we should not been in front of.
You're talking about with no address?
With no address. When we were touring, we were opening for bands that we should not have been opening
for.
I
was there the day y'all met Three Doors Down and ended up going on tour with them. And I always thought like that was a weird pairing. Like I'm sure it was great, but it was also, I'm sure that there were times.
That was a great pairing because we had enough classic rock to us.
That's fair,
there was a little point of overlap for Three Doors fans and us.
And then You opened for Shinedown for a while.
We
too,
did,
right?
and that was actually pretty good because
Yeah.
again, they're hard rock, and we're not. But
And I feel like y'all had gotten a little heavier by then too.
the label forced us to do that.
And for whatever reason.
Yeah, but those guys still, the Shinedown fans still liked guitar solos, and they were a little Southern rock when they did the Simple Man thing, so that drew in a
That's
crowd.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, we were fine with them, but there were a couple other bands that were maybe heavier and harder. And
Maybe some festival shows that were
festival
probably weird.
shows. I forget
The
what.
Jacksonville show the festival that I saw was great.
Yeah,
But I can imagine others not being so great.
There was a couple that, and I can't remember what the band was, but it was a heavier band.
And that's not really the
It's not really
part.
important.
Yeah.
But we had 60 dates with them, and it was not going well. And we just figured out what we need to do to not get booed is hit that stage. I feel like I'm saying the same thing again, but we had to hit the stage with so much energy and so much ferocious energy that we're going to go, nope. You might not like
with
it.
Perfect or something.
You may not like it, but you're going to sit there quietly and take it. And that was the only way to turn that crowd because they wanted that much heavier band and maybe Breaking Band. No, I forget. Whatever. It doesn't matter. And we were like, our attitude was like, we're just going to like literally try to scare this crowd with the energy level. Like we don't have it in the music. Our music isn't that kind of angry. It has some anger, but
Sure.
it wasn't that kind of thing. But energy wise, we're going to try to like, and there's a video on YouTube that somebody, I didn't know it existed, but somebody else was like, oh, I saw this video and I watched it and they're panning the crowd and there's a row of girls that are just like, they're like they're just like mouth open. What the fuck is this? And that was what we were like, we got to get them to what the fuck is this? Just so they don't turn on us. And it just was like, that was one of those stage kind of experiences of going, oh, this is what we have to do with this crowd. And I bet with comedy, it's the same thing. If it's a rule, you got to do something to get them on your side or at least get them, I'm sure knowing, like you said, watching the crowd ahead of time and being like, this is what I'm going to need to do with these guys. And then I can get into my normal.
I think another thing that comics can do that is different than what bands can do, because a joke lasts 10 seconds. If you're not committed for 3 minutes to something, but you can throw a joke out there that's on the darker side,
right,
or on the sillier side, or like wherever, and see if it starts to work. And then if it doesn't, like that's when you start to see. And I haven't ever really had this experience, but that's when you start to see comics like almost try to make the crowd angry, because it's like your guys aren't even here to play ball.
And I gotta and it's again, it's never an ego thing. You're just trying to do the best show you can do, and sometimes
I think any seasoned performer has had their ego killed enough.
Yeah,
that it stops being about that.
It's not about that. It's just I just want to do a good job, and sometimes I'm gonna have to like work with you to let me do a good job, because ultimately what I want is for you to have enjoyed the show.
What are some of the logistical things that are different that were...
There was, even though things had crashed, there was a lot more money in it, and there was a lot more money in it.
Touring was still very profitable back then.
Yes. I think it's
like
still,
album sales weren't,
but I think it still is, but not. It still is like in the percentage of what people make.
Sure, there's just so many more hands in the pocket now.
Yeah, that's the 360 deals and everything. I think that's really changed.
Yeah, venues taking cuts of merch. I feel like that never really happened.
No.
Even Floyd's, like, when they would provide a house merch guy, it was a flat fee. It wasn't a percent. Like, it would be like, you guys pay the merch dude $100 and we provide him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And merch was definitely a big deal for us. But yeah, it just is the same thing. I think if anything, like it's just shrunk a little bit and routing's gotten probably tighter. Like sometimes they used to just, hey, you got a show in Orlando and then you got a show in Cleveland. And now people don't do the zigzaggy stuff. We'd usually be in a decent route, but then they'd be like, oh, there's a good opportunity. We're going to send you all the way over here. And I don't think people do that nearly as much. And I think even more, it was always about the super fan, right? The street team, but even more now, I think it's really become about the super fans.
Yeah.
Not just the casual. A friend of mine plays in a band called Murder by Death.
Yeah, I know that band.
Yeah, he's the bass player in that band, and we played with him for a long time in Denver before he got that gig. And they sell out everywhere they go. Depending on the city, that might be 300 people, that might be 2,000 people. But we've been to a couple of the shows, and the armloads of merch people carrying out of there. And it's not that they're a famous band, but if you know that band, they're very likely your favorite band.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for sure. No, I think the drive-by truckers, I think, are
Yeah,
very
yeah,
similar.
right.
Like, all of them, like the people that love that band, like that's their favorite band. We buy everything. We buy all the reissues.
And they know if they make a record, they can almost to a pretty exact point know how many they need to make.
Or at least like a minimum.
A minimum. Yeah, that's what I mean. The first run. And so it's just like they've got super fans. And that super fan who is actually going to follow you and actually going to buy your records and buy the vinyl and all that stuff, like those are gold compared to the casual person who's, oh yeah, I've heard of those bands. Let's go. Maybe we'll go to the thing. And those guys aren't going to follow you later, or if they do, it's just going to be Spotify.
I think those people are fewer and further between than they're used to.
I think they are,
Yeah.
but I think
and more compartmentalized.
Yeah, and where a band gets a big pop of popularity, and I love like Wet Leg.
Yeah.
I love them, and I really respect what they've done and how they've gotten. But right now, they're in this bubble of popularity where they're just doing these rooms. And the hope is that maybe we won't always be in these rooms, but when we shrink down to these rooms, those super fans will still be filling up those smaller rooms.
Yeah. Like I think about King Gizzard and the Wizard Lizard. Like,
yeah,
I feel like a
right.
similar thing happened.
Similar
to them.
thing, where, and actually I know this for a fact because like a bunch of my friends in Denver were going to Red Rocks to see them, and they weren't necessarily fans before. They were just like, oh, I've heard about this band, and then awesome friends of theirs were like word of mouth. Oh, you got to come to the show. They're so good. But yeah, they're just having this moment, but really, like I said, it was always about the super fan because it used to be that the super fan is who was doing the word of mouth stuff to get you all of your fans, street teams passing out flyers, that kind of thing. Now the super fan that's your most coveted market.
But I think the opposite is true for what you're doing, what a lot of these bands that are coming back. Here's the thing, like you have so many bands coming back and touring that were both like big in the 90s and 2000s, but then you also still have
80s bands,
the Chicago's and
all
the
yeah,
where they barely have any of their original members. They might as well be a tribute act.
Yeah.
But those aren't the super fan. Like those are the casual, person that remembers 2 or 3 of their songs from back in the day. And I feel like that's probably true for Petty Nick's experience too, right?
Yeah, it is a tribute band.
Right.
So it's very easy because people do remember all those songs and they are coming for those songs. The band on its own is lucky to benefit from a lot of word of mouth. People are bringing people to the show. And one thing, and we're just for context, we usually sell between say 300 and 600 tickets to a show.
That's killer.
Yeah. And we usually don't advertise. Occasionally we will if the tickets are looking a little slow, maybe throw up a Facebook ad. But we're very lucky to benefit from that word of mouth where people are like, oh, you got to see this show. And we always ask, Adrian always asks the crowd to cheer who's seen us before. And it'll be about
50-50.
A little less. Oddly enough, it'll be about 50-50. And so the interesting thing is that new people are still coming. And
right.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I mean.
Yeah.
Right? It's like y'all don't have the super fan. You might have petty super fans.
There are a number of people that definitely come to every show. We're getting to the point where there's people that have seen.
And see, that's just something I wasn't aware of with any kind of a tribute band.
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
I can imagine it with like, Zappa Plays Zappa
Yeah.
or something like that. But yeah, that's interesting.
It's intimidating in a weird way. I don't know if you've run into this, but it's great that we have people who've seen us maybe 30 times, maybe more. But like in some ways, they're in the crowd, right? And
Yeah.
you're going, I feel a little awkward that this is basically the same show
Right.
that you've seen
I
over and over.
I think it's worse for comics.
Yeah,
than-
really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because like they
I-
know my they know my punchlines and shit.
And I've always argued we worry about it as musicians, but I don't think other than some very savvy music fans, no one remembers set list order. You know what I mean? They just like the songs. They'd have to see a lot of shows before they went, oh, they're playing that in order
my
again.
favorite band never uses a set list.
Oh, really?
Not ever.
Yeah.
They did. So they did the Southern Rock Opera Revisited tour,
Okay.
and they managed to make using a set list still new because they never had.
Oh, that's
So
really
like
cool.
I saw 3 shows on that tour,
Yeah.
4, but that was the first time I'd ever seen them play the same 4 shows, like
Yeah.
the same show twice. Period,
Wow.
like ever. And I've seen
That's
them. Like
pretty
100
awesome. I wish we could do
100
that.
It's just a different thing. They tried using a set list and they wouldn't follow it, so they just
Yeah, they
stopped.
just stopped. We just do way more of a theater show, and it is way more of
Yeah.
a show. And
Well, that was what that tour was.
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
It was a very theatrical
Yeah.
thing, and I think it's the only reason I pointed that out was just because I think it's a totally different way of operating.
Yeah.
It's not a like their typical shows are very organic, very raw, very
and that's
not
probably the draw.
theatrical.
Yeah, and they
But
can
that is part of it.
and they can go slower. Probably it's probably fine if there are gaps in between songs. Like a lot of times, we find ourselves in situations where we're like banging songs pretty close together because you got to keep it moving. Not as much as the old. I played in a bunch of beach bars in Jacksonville Beach and whatever. And man, at those shows, you could not leave dead air because the
Yeah.
dance floor would stop, and if the dance floor stopped, people would start wandering out the door.
I've heard like Chris Rock talk about performing like Bonnaroo,
Wow.
and it's like unimaginable to me as a comic,
Right.
controlling a crowd of 80,000. Like that's insane. Like
I can't wrap my head around that.
yeah,
Not to be nitpicky or go down a rabbit hole, but man, I'm a huge Nate Bargatze fan.
yeah. I saw him just earlier this year. Yeah,
But not his one of his specials that was recent was like in front of 20,000 people. And man, did I love his earlier, smaller, and it's not anything against Nate. It's not like his material isn't as good. But
I think it stops being the thing that you're talking
yeah,
about.
yeah, it stops. And he had to slow down because you got to wait for 20,000 people to react to a joke.
And you hear it moves throughout the room.
Back.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love the material. Nothing against him. It's a different animal when you're playing to that many people.
No, I noticed the same thing when I saw him this year. Like he wasn't playing to the whole room.
Yeah.
He was just playing to this corner of the people because that's all he could see.
That's all he could see.
That's all he can pay attention.
Although music is the same way.
Yeah.
I've been lucky enough to play, I don't know, 20,000 people.
I saw you play in front of 27,000 people.
27. Okay. And it's not that different than playing to 500 because that's about how many people you can see. You know what I mean? Even
Yeah.
if it's the daytime and it's broad daylight, once it gets very far back, you can't.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know what those people are doing or reacting to. I will say the first time we walked on stage in a civic center when our song was actually on the radio so people knew who we were because we toured a few months and the song wasn't out so nobody knew who we were. And when we walked out on stage and that roar literally scared me. It was maybe 8,000 or 9,000 people and it was so loud that like we all jumped. You were just like, oh my God. Granted, it's a civic center and so it's all held in and stuff. It's not like being outside, but man, that sound is just, it was just like, oh God.
Yeah.
You were like, danger.
That's why people who say they wish they could have seen the Beatles. No, you don't.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have heard a goddamn thing.
You wouldn't have heard anything. And that's why they completely stopped.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I hope you're going to edit the crap out of this.
Side note, I didn't.
Yeah, just last thing I
Yeah,
want to
let's do
ask
it.
you, just I want to give you a chance to like plug all the things that you're doing now.
Yeah.
Talk about if you have any. I know we're out of time here, but I just want to make sure that I know you play with Adrian O, Petty Nicks. There's a couple other guys that you work with too, right?
Yeah. I want to plug Eric Golden.
Eric Golden.
He does classic country, honky tonk, Bakersfield kind of stuff. We did an album last year. He just put out a Christmas album. I didn't work on it, but it's great. A young up and coming artist, we did an EP with Lena Corrales. I would really recommend checking her out. Very indie rock, very 90s. And of course, yeah, Adrian O. And yeah, those are the main things.
And do you still produce quite a bit, or
I still produce quite a bit. It's slow.
we followed the live
Yeah,
music
yeah.
thread, but
Yeah, no, I still produce, and I would say that's a good part of my income is producing, and it's slowed down with the economy and various things going on. Not a great time to spend large chunks of money for a lot of people, but still doing a lot of that. And then, of course, I teach and coach. I do artist development, which is basically helping artists figure out exactly who they want to be and how to get there, and a blanket term that covers songwriting, stage performance, music business stuff, all those things. So that's something I do.
you might have a new client.
Okay. Yeah, we could talk about that. Yeah, I love doing it, man. Some of it was where I got the idea, but some of it that I thought, thinking back, I was like, what I got from guys like Terry Clark and Steve-O Robertson at Atlantic, and looking back, how helpful that was to have somebody help me think so many things through, and someone who had been in the business and think things through. And then, like I said, learning how much stage coaching, for example, that I'd always been doing with bands without thinking about, we would talk about it. Ben and I talked for hours and hours all the time about everything. And, or even with Adrian, when I started playing with her and just helping, and then it's, oh, I should probably be, but yeah, so artist development, performancehigh.net.
There'll be links to everything in the description.
Yeah,
too.
Performance High is who I work for out in Denver, and it's mainly a vocal studio. It's a pretty premier vocal studio. And then I do, like I said, the artist development stuff. And I've been lucky enough to have clients in New York and LA and a few in Europe, and it's been, I really enjoy doing it. It's one of those things where I obviously love music and the business of making music and business of making art, really. And I just love talking about it, and getting to talk about it with people who are like moving along it's just a blast for me. I told a client the other day, they were like, oh, we went over time a little bit. And I was like, dude, this is barely work for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I love doing this so much that it is work and whatever, but I barely.
Yeah, you're like, I have to value my time just
Yeah,
so I
yeah,
can pay my bills.
but there's nothing I love talking about more, and delving into, you get stuck creatively or stuck even mentally. All the time, we've talked about like imposter syndrome, and talking that through with people can be really helpful. Also go get a qualified therapist, but
yeah, we're big advocates for therapy on this podcast.
Yeah, but talking about it with just a music dude who's been doing it forever and has probably suffered the same problems or been around a guy who did can be helpful for people. So I feel really lucky to get to do that.
Well, Justin, I'm gonna have to have you back. I
Anytime.
feel like we talked for 2 hours and barely scratched the surface.
Scratches, and it's so.
Maybe we should just start a podcast.
We should just start a podcast.
Yeah, and it's the spinoff premiere here.
It's great getting to reconnect with you too, man. We're so lucky to have you guys around, and honestly, you in particular, really, what a great fan does is make a band better, and you honestly made No Address better with just hanging out and being like, oh, I like that one, and you go, oh, cool. Second set of eyes on the project. So yeah, anyway, great to reconnect. I hope we get to talk more, and I'll be back.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being here.
Edit this so this isn't like crushingly long. Okay.
No, that was
Like I said, it was great reconnecting with Justin. If you want us to start our own podcast together, let us know in the comments. Make sure y'all check out the Petty Nicks Experience. Check out their website. Go catch one of their shows. Next week, we got Red Padilla from Red and the Revelers. They're my new favorite band. I saw them open for Morris Day and the Time on New Year's Eve. It was amazing. I've been friends with Red for a long time, but we just met in person when we did this interview. So look forward to that. I do want to remind you that I've started a Patreon for this podcast. I do everything from start to finish, from booking the episodes to producing them, editing them, distributing them. And if you're enjoying it, the Patreon is just a way for you to support the podcast directly and help keep it sustainable. There will be some extra content and some bonus footage and extra early access to things, but the main thing is just a way to directly support us. We also just hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube today, so thank y'all so much. Tell your friends about the podcast if you've been enjoying it.